I'm Betsy Brown. I'm one of the board members with, can y'all hear me? No, okay. How about now? Yeah. Okay, I'm Betsy Brown. I'm one of the board members with the Save Acworth History Foundation. And tonight, our foundation is honored to present a panel discussion on the Joe Hayes era of education in Acworth. I've been tasked with introducing the very few people in Acworth who absolutely need no introduction. And that's Gayle Nettles, who of course is the daughter of Mr. Hayes, and frankly was one of my favorite teachers in high school. She was on the forefront of letting people know that women had the brains to be in science. Really, I mean, so much I remember about Gayle. And of course, her husband, Henry Nettles, a much remembered teacher and coach. And lastly, Butch Price, who, like Mr. Hayes, became a longtime principal of Acworth Elementary. Tonight, we get to hear them reminisce and tell stories about themselves and about Mr. Hayes and, ancillary people like Bill Hamilton. But I think they've decided to sort of divide up the program into three parts. And one, we're going to start out with Gayle, and she's going to tell us about the history of Mr. Hayes and how she came to be recruited to Acworth. Then Henry's going to tell us about how he came to Acworth. One of the ways he came was hitchhiking. From West Alabama to Acworth. Now that's love, because you came to see your woman, didn't you? And then Butch is going to tell us about, he's going to be the grand finale. So, Gayle, start us out by telling us something about the history of your dad, just, what you think's important, and how he got you over here.
Okay, well.
And how he got it.
And how he got here.
I don't really know where to start, but.
Okay, I'm falling down on my job. This is the planning committee. And they were sort of like herding cats, but, I think they've got a real great program put together. There you go.
I don't really know where to start, but my father's been in education for 47 years. He was 19 years at Acworth Elementary, then he had 18 years of, I hope that adds up, must be 28 in Alabama. So, thank goodness he found this place. How he found it, I don't know. I think every time he went through it, he was a graduate of Auburn. He got his BS there and his master's there, and later his 6th year in administration. Every time he went through Auburn, he would stop and he would go in and talk to his old professors. Evidently, they put him on to Acworth. So, he came over here, interviewed with Mr. Sprayberry, and we got hired. All right, we never heard of Acworth. So, I was finishing college over at Livingston. I guess it was State College then, might have been University. It's changed its name. It's now University of West Alabama. So, they changed everything. I still think of it as Livingston. Anyway, Henry and I both were in Livingston there. I finished in 3 years. He was on football scholarship, so it took him 4. So, but things happen. That sort of thing. I'll tell you a little bit about my dad's past. He was one of 9 living children, and he was toward the bottom. Yes, he was. Okay. Anyway, this is a picture of my mother, Ethel-Dean McCain, and my dad, Joe Hayes. They were married in 1933, and they got married and they left immediately for Auburn University, and they went to school. And kind of a strange thing, Henry and I got married on June the 7th. That was a Sunday afternoon, and on Tuesday, we enrolled at Auburn University working on our master's.
Oh.
So,
We don't really want the public to know we went to Auburn.
yes, we do. Yes, we do.
We only have a certain amount of times we can say Auburn.
Yes, that's right.
Don't forget the roll tide every time.
All right. The picture at the bottom is a picture of Henry and I when we got married. The little boy right below Henry is my brother Bill. He was about 5 years old at the time. So when Dad and I moved over, that might go on with another part. But anyway, the church is no longer there. It was Acworth Methodist Church. And where the post office is now, that was the Methodist parsonage. And somehow the government, we had swapped the land for the post office for where the Methodist Church is on the corner up here.
Right.
Yeah. So there is a little park across from the post office, and that's where the church was. And that's where I joined the church when I first came over in 1958. Okay, what brought me over, of course, was Daddy. He called and said, I've got you an interview for a job here. And so I came over and interviewed, and North Car was just being built. You could walk through it, it wasn't even finished that summer. So it was quite something. Also, there was a monetary reason I came over. Georgia paid teachers $1,000 more than Alabama. So that was an incentive. So,
But how much?
I'll tell you. Okay. Anyway, the first year I was over here, I lived with Mom and Dad, and then, let's see what. Okay. I need to go back and go back to Etheldean and Daddy up there. They were married in 1933. My sister Valley, Joe, was born in 1934. I was born in 1937, and the day after I was born, Etheldean, my mother, died and left Daddy with a newborn and a 3-year-old. With the help of my maternal grandmother, she made a home for us, and for 5 years things were fine. Then when I was 5, my grandmother died with a brain tumor, and so Daddy was a single parent with a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. So those were difficult years, but we also got very close. We were almost like a family in a family, if you understand what I mean. We were extremely close. My sister Mally always had my back. She was I don't know, she was a little mother. I mean, she helped me get dressed when I was 5. She picked out my clothes. And after my dad married my stepmother in 1943, she married him in May and I was 6 in July. Yeah, okay, that sort of thing. Anyway, they had 2 children, Laura and Bill. So that went along fine.
We have a picture of a...
Oh yeah, all right, this is Daddy and my stepmother, Ruth Hayes.
Yeah. And you mentioned she was a great cook.
Oh yes.
We all know what a great cook.
They had Laura. Laura was born in 45. She was a World War II baby. They happened after that. And then Bill was born in 1954. So he was the boy that, after 3 girls, probably a little spoiled. Also, we had been eating Daddy's cooking for a year. Listen, he tried, but he was not a good cook. And so when Daddy married Mother, my stepmother, she was a wonderful cook. So we thought we had died and gone to heaven. So that worked out well. But I've got to tell you about all the big money I made when I came over here. Okay, my first job at North Cobb, they paid $3,050 a year. For my first year there, I had a 10th grade English class, a 10th grade biology class, a 9th grade English, and 2 general sciences. The general sciences were out of 2 different textbooks, so I had 5 preparations. Okay, for all of this, after I got my paycheck, first paycheck, you know what? They took out federal tax, state tax, they took out Social Security and insurance. So when I got my check, it was $218. Oh yes, but wait now, next year I got a big raise. I got my first paycheck the second year and it was $219. Yes, and listen, I was worth every penny of it. So, but I guess we can go on. What's next? Okay, when Mother and Daddy moved over, my sister, Mally Hayes Addicts, she was married to Charlie Addicts, so they moved over too. Mally had taught for 3 years at Montgomery Elementary School, first grade. So she came over, and Charlie came over, and they lived on Summit Circle up there. And Charlie taught 5th grade. That's a picture with one of his classes. And there's Mally teaching 1st grade, and they both retired from there. Okay, let's see. Also, when we came over, we brought Minnie Claire Jackson, which was Minnie Claire Jackson Orr. She taught at Acworth Elementary, and then she moved to Due West, and she retired at Due West. Barbara Reynolds came over, and she taught PE at North Cobb for several years, and then she went back to Alabama. So, okay, is there anything else?
Well, when we were sort of brainstorming about this, you told some great stories about a couple about kindnesses, how kind your father was,
Oh.
and how he took responsibility.
Oh,
for his
yes.
children.
Okay. When we were in Pine Hill, I guess I was about in the 5th grade, a little girl broke her arm. The family, I guess they must have been very poor. They had no insurance. So Daddy and I took her to Montgomery, Alabama, which is about 100 miles away, to St. Margaret's Hospital, which was a charity hospital run by nuns. They took her, and think about this, this is a little 4th grader. She goes into the hospital to have this operation. Her parents aren't there. When she's able to get out of the hospital, Daddy picks her up and we take her back to home. But another thing, which is, this is when we lived in Marbury, Alabama. Okay, this is back during World War II. How many of you remember World War II? Don't see any hands, and I'm the oldest person in this room. Okay, all right. Anyway, back then, you may not know this, but gas was rationed, tires were rationed, sugar was rationed, everything was rationed because we were fighting a war, and never in my life has our country ever been won before, but it was. Oh, we had victory gardens and we did all sorts of things like that. But this little girl missed the bus. Okay. We have no telephone. Parents have no telephone. Gas is rationed. So what does Daddy do? He brings her home. She spends the night with us. She takes the bath sheets. We play with her now. The next morning, she wears my clothes to school. Which I never see again, but that's okay. That's okay. But that's the sort of thing. Daddy took care of his kids. And when he retired, and this brings tears to my eyes, but he said, the only thing you leave this world is your children. And being in education, I've had a lot of children. Okay, so.
One other thing
Okay.
before you move on. I'm having a senior moment.
Oh, that's okay, I have them too. Anybody else in here have them? Okay. We have some honest people here.
Okay, so, I wanted to ask you when you two met.
Okay, we've been in the 5th grade.
Was that at Pine Hill?
No, that was at Pine Hill. I just moved there.
Okay.
And I liked him immediately.
Okay.
I did. And I still have the Valentine he gave me then, all these years. And it said, to my sweetheart. Oh, and that got my heart right then. But listen to how he signed it, from Henry Nettles. You see, he was very romantic.
Well, another thing, had meant to ask you. You did say that because of your mother having passed, that you spent, instead of going to a daycare center, you actually went to school with Mally and your dad.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't going to tell that, but I will. All right, this is after my grandmother passed away, and she was a wonderful woman. Can you imagine you're handed a newborn and a 3-year-old after you've raised 5 girls of your own? But she knew what she was doing. She was a good grandmother and a wonderful substitute. But, okay, now what am I going to tell?
That instead of having a babysitter.
Oh, okay, all right. This is back in the 1940s. You understand that? 1940s. Some of you don't remember that. And you're very lucky that you don't. Okay. All right, anyway, there were no daycare centers. There was no fast food. If people didn't cook, they didn't eat. Anyway, I would get up, get dressed, and I would go to school with them. And I would stay in the classroom with Mally. She was in 3rd grade at that time. I would just sit there and listen, and I was very good. So they didn't mind me being there. It's just like, I'm not here. So, but that's what happened. But no daycare centers, can't leave a child at home by themselves. So what do? It was a small rural community. Nobody cared. I could tell you a little something else, but that goes way back to school. My mother was Ethel Bean was a 3rd grade teacher. My dad was the principal at the school. I hate to tell you this, but the school must have been built in the 1920s. It had no running water. It had outdoor toilets. So, but there was a lot of education. If you have a good teacher, nothing else really matters. That's what's important. That's what's important.
You got like 2 familiar places dialed up.
Yeah,
You get to them whenever you want.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
Goes back to what Gayle said to start with, when I was in the 5th grade and they moved in, we got a new principal at Pine Hill, called it Pine Hill High School.
Yeah.
He was 12 grades. Just one school, small, we had 28, and I was graduating class. But for some reason, she and I kind of hit it off at the 5th grade, and as time went on up to high school, we became a little closer than boy, girlfriend, sweetheart, whatever. I knew she was wanting to go to college to be a teacher. She pretty much was sure she was going to Livingston. I wanted to go be a teacher and coach. Didn't have anything, any way financially going. So I went over and tried out for football and got earned a scholarship to help pay some of it. Also joined the National Guard to stay out of Vietnam, but also got $37 a quarter. And that helped Gayle and me. And that was all we had. But I find that funny, huh? Anyway, so it worked on, and we went on, and we knew that we wanted to get married. We just knew that. And as Gayle said earlier, she finished in 3 years and came to North Top first year, and I finished in 4 and came over. Mr. Hayes set up an interview with Mr. T.C. Cantrell, coaching math, trying to coach folks like Pig Pruitt, but that didn't work out too well. Anyway, we got married that summer. As Gayle said, went to Auburn, and believe it or not, you could go to Auburn for 6 weeks for $50. If you went the next 6 weeks, it was 5 more. So for $55 tuition, we could go to Auburn. That's another reason we went, but it was close by. Well, going from there and got into coaching, and my first year's salary was $3,400. I got $200 coaching supplement to help Albert Matthews and Henry Sewell with the varsity team and coach the B team. Helped Roger Russell with the girls and boys varsity team and coached the B team girls and boys and umpired the baseball game. And that was all for $200 something. So times have changed. We did come, part of what Gayle said, we did come to Acworth, Georgia, because they did pay a little more than Alabama. And as Betsy said, the year that Gayle was over here and I was over there, I didn't have bus fare, wasn't in the way except stick your thumb out there, if you've never done that, it's dangerous this day and time. But it wasn't dangerous back then. People would pick you up, suitcase and all, haul you. In fact, that particular person was going down toward Atlanta. He swung through Bay River and dropped me off. That's been kind of help out a little bit. But anyway, we went on, got married, and what Butch is going to talk about more about Miss Hayes and recruiting as to how we got over here. But when we got here, the house up on the left over there, McClure house on Mr. and Mrs. McClure on it, and they had an apartment that had a kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. Everything was furnished. The utensils, pots, pans, sheets, pillowcases. All we had to do was be there and buy food and eat. Well, on Friday afternoons, we could go to the grocery store. I'll get the name of that right now, but the grocery store downtown, and get our groceries for the week. Write a $15 check, take the change from it, and eat at North Cobb. The 5 meals and lunch the next day. That's a difference right now too, right? I think we paid $40 a month for the rent at the McClure. Now, I say that because Butch is going to hit on it a little more, but when we came, Mr. Hayes said, y'all going to stay at the McClure house. That was Mr. Hayes and all some other teachers. Butch will talk more about that. When he recruited you, he pretty much knew where you were going to stay. Now, he didn't expect you to homestead there, but he wanted you to stay there a year and get out of the way and go save some money and get it on your own, and then he would have somebody else come in the next year. But Mr. Hayes walked my principal all the way through 5th grade off, whipped my rear end more than one time I won't talk about. Back in those days, it wasn't in discussion. You know, if a teacher sent you back, you got to whip it. It didn't matter. They didn't have to call mom and daddy. Sometimes we might get one when we got back. That's all. But Mr. Hayes, as Gayle was saying, even when I was in high school, he would come by after school, not only me, but all of, come on, Henry, I got the dogs, let's go rabbit hunt. I got the shotgun, I got the sheriff, let's go. I'll go to the Alabama River fishing. All those guys, that was Mr. Hayes. To sum him up, as Gayle said, you know, he was a, Butch and I served a long time as principal. Principal this day and time had nothing to do with principal back then. If those of you are old enough to remember those days, it was two different things. As my daddy had said to me when I was principal here in Cobb County, you don't need to come over here. Daddy, I can't come. I'm the principal. I've got to go. Well, no, you can come. You're the principal. Just leave. That's what they go fishing, hunting, whatever. Stay there. They leave the secretary in charge and that kind of thing. So that's just the way it was. That's what we grew up being.
Henry, I wonder how many guys in this room got called out by Mr. Hayes at Acworth. Go fishing or go work on something. It was pretty common. It was pretty common. He loved to fish. I think that's one of the things.
I think when he crossed that bridge and saw those lakes, he was home.
Right. I can remember him riding through town in a sedan with a John boat sticking out of the trunk. That was
There's a
classic.
hole in it that you can see the floor.
That was the thing.
But seriously, he was, as my dad-in-law, and that's how I got over here. I didn't get over here because I wanted to come to Acworth, never heard of Acworth. Mr. Hayes, though we would get married, he found me a job with Miss T.C. Cantrell, and I thanked him for that. And couldn't ask for a better father-in-law. He was a different breed of person, but I tell you, he loved kids, and he loved school, and he'd do anything for you.
When you went rabbit hunting, you went with my daddy.
Oh,
Huey
did he?
Cox.
Okay.
You went with my daddy, Huey Cox.
You go, oh, yeah,
Rabbit hunting.
yeah.
Some of y'all remember one of our former superintendents here in Cobb County, Kermit Keenum. To me, the best superintendent we've ever had during my time. That's another point. But he had something on Facebook directed to me today. He said, I wish I could be there. He said, I could talk 30 minutes about Mr. Hayes. And he could. And he was good. And any one of us, I could look around and see folks like Richard and Olivia, a whole bunch of them been with him. Y'all know what kind of fellow he was. Now Butch is gonna get into the meat and bones of what made him more special than just as a father and a father-in-law, and bunch of grandchildren and all here. One of them, yes, that's all right. But, so Butch is gonna, you want to
Okay,
introduce
I want you to tell us, how long y'all you been married?
Oh, well, Saturday, June the 7th, that'll be our 66th wedding anniversary. I can't do the cipher to go back to the 5th grade and tell you how long we've been a couple. So since we're in the 5th grade, I can't go back and do that cipher. Y'all like that.
Well, I think y'all been, I speak for everybody, you're just a model of what a marriage and parents ought to be. Let me see how far behind I am on these. These are some pictures of Livingston, and when y'all were there, it was a very small school, wasn't it?
It was about 500 students when we started.
500. That, what hall was that?
And that's Bill Graves.
That was mostly where the
Classes.
education classes.
Okay. And we know that it started out in 1835 as Livingston Female Academy.
Right.
So you could only be a teacher, right?
Yeah.
That's all they let you be.
And kind of a side note, my mother and 3 of her sisters went there. So I come from a teaching family.
Right. And now then it's University of West Alabama, I bet you everybody still calls it Livingston.
We did.
And that's,
Where Paul, that's where the girls' dorm, it was the girls' dormitory and the cafeteria was on the bottom floor.
and
Now
she
let
was
Butch do that.
instrumental, wasn't she?
Look, you did.
Well, him and Gayle been married longer than I am old, so. My story about Joe Hayes kind of goes back to when I was raised over in Alabama. I lived in a community much like Coates and Clark community here, except it was coal mining. And the coal mining trade was here today, gone tomorrow. And I lived in just, I would say, 5 different communities as I grew up, because the coal mine would close, my daddy would get a job in another coal mine, we'd move there, and they furnished the houses, and they had a store. And typically when the coal mine closed, they demolished everything in town. And so when I got to be in the 5th grade, he got a job with Alabama Power Company, and they had just built a new school, and when I was in the 5th grade, that was the first time that I'd ever been in a school that had indoor plumbing or indoor heating. We had the coal stoves, but when I got in the 5th grade, it was prime because Alabama Power Company had built it. And the sad thing about it is every place that I ever lived, I can't go back. I could never take my kids over there and say, that's where I went to church, or I lived in that house, because every one of them, in all of the 5 places that we lived, torn down. So I kind of feel like that the good Lord sort of, in an indirect way, got me to Livingston. And the connections, when I think about Livingston and then over here, my high school coach had played ball at Livingston with Bill Hamilton's dad. They played on the same team. And as a kid growing up, all I knew was sports, and that's all I was interested in. And my high school coach talked a lot about Livingston. So when I graduated from high school, I'd never heard of Bill Hamilton until I got over here. But it was sort of an indirect way. And so when I got out of high school, I really had no clue as to what I wanted to do. I didn't know anything about careers in the world. All I knew is I didn't want to be a coal miner. And I knew that I kind of was interested in teaching and coaching. So my high school coach was responsible for me attending Livingston's at that time, because I was there in 1960, it was known as Livingston State College. And when they were there, the buildings that you saw were there. When I went, they were there. And by the time I graduated 4 years later, the college had doubled in size, completely doubled. And to say that we had a lot of students would be stretching the point, because we only probably had 800 or 900 total students in the whole school. That was all 4 grades. And so that about that time, education, there was a shortage of teachers. And Mr. Hayes had taken over as principal at Acworth School, and he recruited a number of people from Alabama from the time they came over in the 58, 59 year until I came over in 64. Mr. Hayes had recruited people like David Sims. David came over. David went to Livingston. And Mr. Hayes somehow had connections with this lady here. She was the dean of women. And with education having a shortage, there was a demand for teachers. I'm sure Cobb County Board of Education had some kind of a personnel department, but they didn't really provide a lot of teachers. There wasn't a lot of people applying to be a teacher. And so Mr. Hayes would call her and he'd say, "You got any candidates that you want to send over?" That's how David Sims got here. David didn't even have a degree when he got here. He was still a couple of quarters, I think, 1 or 2 quarters from actually having his degree. So Mr. Hayes helped him get a provisional teaching certificate. He taught that first year, went back to Livingston that summer, and I think probably finished up, came back and taught, and then went back and got his degree, got his master's degree at the University of Alabama. And so there were a number of teachers who came in, and I think Bill Hamilton came somewhere in that era too. And most everybody came and worked for Mr. Hayes. So that brings us on up to the year that I graduated from college. Joe and I had much the same kind of relationship that Henry and Gayle had. We started, they are going to be liking each other, put it this way. But we went to the same little Methodist church, and we lived in the same community, so we became interested in each other all the way through school. She was 1 year behind me, and when I entered Livingston, you don't, I don't know whether any of y'all have ever been homesick or not. If you've been homesick, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you hadn't, there must be some illness compared to it. But when I went to Livingston, that first 3 to 4 weeks that I was there, because I'd never really been away from home much. I just stayed around the house, and got over to Livingston, and there was nobody from my county. Not even, I couldn't say from my high school, nobody from my county was over there. So I was one lonesome fella. Didn't have a car, couldn't go home on weekends. And I called my mother that first day, first week I'd been over. I said, "Mama, if you'll come pick me up." I said, "I'll go to the junior college there in town." She said, "You go another week and we'll talk about it." So the next Friday, I called her again. Same story. Next Friday, I called her again. I reckon she knew that if I just stayed just long enough, I'd fall in love with it. And so I did, and I made it through that first year. Didn't do real well academically, because I was more interested in home, but I couldn't go home. But anyway, so the next year, Joe comes over there. The world is totally different. I've become a pretty good student. I made these lists a number of times. And for some reason, the two of us were liked by Miss Hole, the Dean of Women. And so Mr. Hayes would call her and he'd say, I got some vacancies I need you to fill. Well, in 1963, many of you will know Frank Brown and Jennifer Brown. What was her
Morgan.
Morgan. She was a Morgan. And Jennifer Morgan and Frank, they were at Livingston. They dated Livingston, got married, moved over here, and lived in that apartment that Henry and them lived in for 1 year. Then they were out and they moved into a house over on Word Street. I believe it was next door to Mr. Hayes, I think. Anyway, so that's how the recruitment process started. For whatever reason, the class of 1964, of which we were in, must have some quality students, because when Mr. Hayes called and talked to Miss Hoyle, she gave him mine and Joe's name first. And that was one of the lucky breaks that I got in life. And so I remember the day he called me. I was working with the Red Cross in Birmingham. I finished 1 quarter ahead of Joe. And so I got out 1 quarter early. I was working with the Red Cross, and he called me and he said, I need you and Joe Carroll to come over here. That's how he called her, Joe Carroll, most of the time. He'd say, this weekend. I didn't have a car. I had to borrow my uncle's car. And we drove over here, and I told this story, most of you have heard it many times, but as we drove over here, we got here a little early. It was on, he said, we had to meet him on a Saturday morning. It was in the month of May. And the lake was full of water. The trees were green, much like they have been this year. And I'd grown up on the river, so when we came across the little dam, we had about an hour to kill. So we pulled in there, and I told Joe, I said, you know what, I said, I'd love to live here. And because the water interested me so much. And so we go over to Acworth School, meet Mr. Hayes, and I couldn't tell you anything about the interview. I don't remember anything about it. All I know is when the interview was over that day, Mr. Hayes said, he pointed to me, he said, I got a spot for you, but I don't have a spot for Joe Carroll right now. And so, you know, that was kind of depressing because, but he said, come on, we're going down to North Cobb. And so he got on a phone, called Steve Cantrell, he was principal there at that time. And Steve Cantrell met us down there, and Joe interviewed with him. And he said, yep, said, I got a position in English and Spanish. Said, she is minor in Spanish. So we left, we went home, had a job, and Mr. Hayes took us down there, and he said, right here's where you're going to live. Pointed to that apartment. I said, okay. We left, went back to Birmingham. I went back to Birmingham. She went back to Livingston because she had a couple more courses to finish up. And he called me again that next week. It'd been about 2 weeks. He said, need you to come back over here. He said, there's been some changes. And I said, well, what are they? Well, I ain't telling you. Come over here. So I borrowed the car again, came over here again. We got to meet him at Acworth School, and he said, first of all, he pointed at Joe. He said, you won't be at North Cobb. You'll be here. He said, I've got a vacancy. He said, you're going to be here and teach English, 8th grade English, because that's when Acworth had grades 1 through 8. And so that's how we got here. And let me just kind of give you a little history of the class that we graduated with. There was 115 seniors that graduated from Livingston in 1964. And you could only get one of 2 degrees. One was an education degree, and the other one was a business administration. So I don't know how many people I could go back in the annual probably and figure it out, but I know there was 115 total graduates. And here is the people who Mr. Hayes, some after recruiting us, that process continued for the next 2 months before school started, and we had Joe and myself, that's M.K. Turk. I'm gonna call some names that some of you might remember if you're old enough. M.K. Turk and his wife Katrina Kay, they got married. Tommy Abston and Janet Abston, they came over. Larry Windsor and Susan Hall Windsor. George Trader, Rick Miller, Hazel Jackson. So that was just out of the class that I was in. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11 people. So that's probably, that's probably a little over 10% of the total group of students. And some of them were business majors and didn't want to be teachers. So out of the number of teachers, it would have been a much higher percentage. But that's how many people came. And let's see, some of them taught at Audrey, and people like George Trawick, I think he went down, Mr. Hayes got him a job down in Allstate, down in that area. So that is the people that he recruited, because he had the connection at Livingston, and he just told the dean, said, send me some of your quality students. Well, when Gayle Nettles started, she told you how much money they made. Mine would be 5 years later. We made $43.97. That was my pay. Joe's pay was same thing, but so $43.97. But I had insurance taken out of mine, so I made less than she did. And the second trip we made over, when he hired her, he said, "And you're not going to live in that apartment down there?" I said, "No." He said, "Nope." He said, "I got you another place. You can get in the car." I don't know whether you ever rode with him or not. Got an old car that was like a station wagon around him, and he'd hit the brakes, and before it stopped, he'd slap it up in park, and he would just pull out in front of people. We were riding with him. So he said, "Y'all not gonna live here." So yes, he said, "I'm gonna show you where you're gonna live." Well, once again, just like my high school became, when I left all the high schools that had no running water or heat, here I am. He brings me, he said, "Right here's where y'all gonna live." We rode out to Lucille Avenue, all the way down to the end of the block. The pavement ended, we hit a dirt road. We rode about 300 yards, and it said Girl Scout. And you're talking about luxury, son. We had it made. He said, "Right, your house is right there." It was a brand new 4-room house. And had one tenant in it. He was there for just a very short time. And he said, "You got 40 acres here. You got your own beach. You got your own canoes, paddleboats." And he said, "The only responsibility you have is checking in Girl Scout troops on weekends," he said, "when they use it." We lived there 2 years. And I would say if we had 10 troops that used that over a 2-year period, so I had people coming from Alabama. They'd come over every weekend, and one of my when Tim was born, my oldest kid was born in 1966, and Stanley Frost had a little boy named Darren Frost, and they were about the same age, and Stanley had a boat, and so he and I would set Tim daring up front of that boat and get out on the lake and ski. And then sit up front of the boat. And, but anyway, that kind of gives you some idea now. And Mr. Hayes was such a unique person that for some reason he took me on as a father figure. He started talking to me after 1 year of teaching. He started saying, you know, you need to start considering getting into school administration and that kind of stuff. And at the end of I wanted to tell this story because it shows a different side of Joe Hayes. It kind of relates to what Gayle said about that little girl. At the end of our first year of teaching, it was in the month of May, probably April, but Joe started getting sick and started losing weight, and we're 22, 23 years old, don't know squat, don't know anything, you don't even have a doctor, and didn't think you need one. And but she started getting real sick, and she got worse, and so we went to a doctor in this area, and it was not Dr. Paul.
No.
So I wanted to make sure you understand it wasn't Dr. Paul, because we didn't have a doctor, we didn't know anything, and this doctor started treating her. He diagnosed it as, I don't remember what it was, but it was something to do with her diet. And he put her on eating boiled eggs and that kind of stuff. And so she just kind of got worse and worse and worse, and she started losing weight. And I went back, I talked to the doctor a couple of times, and I remember one Friday, she hadn't been able to teach school there. We had to get a sub for her. And I went in to see the doctor, and he said, I hate to tell you this, but he said, she's not gonna make it. And he said, if I were you, I'd go ahead and start making plans. Well, I'm first of all green as a gourd, didn't know anything, I went back up to the school after meeting me. Mr. Hayes happened to still be there. Usually he's gone fishing, but he happened to be there that day. And I said, Mr. Hayes, I said, I don't know what we're going to do. And he said, let's go. And this was on a Friday afternoon. And he said, let's go to Marietta. And we went. He rode down there. And he said, I'm going to take you to see Dr. Fordson, Luther Fordson. And he said, we need you to take a look at her. So Dr. Ford said, bring her down here. He said, I'll stay. So we went back to Acworth, picked her up, took her down there, and Dr. Fordson looked at her and he said, she's beyond me. He said, let me call Emory. So he called Emory. And we loaded up. He got an ambulance and they hauled her to Emory. And she was admitted, and I would go down there, and I was afraid to ask the doctor because I was afraid I was going to hear the same story that I already heard. So I just kind of hesitated. And they didn't really do anything for about 3 days except run tests. And finally I thought, I finally called him. His name was Dr. James Acworth. He was a gastrointestinal doctor. And I said, well, what about, I said, what, is it bad? And he said, he kind of looked at me like, he said, she's got ulcerative colitis. He said, we can treat this. And, just like a weight. And so for 21 days, she had a thing in her arm. And every day you could see her get better and better and better. And she got out of the hospital, and school was out, so she had another month or so to recover. She started picking back up and gained her weight. And and was ready to go the next year in school. But that's, Mr. Hayes kind of took me under his wings and helped me through that process. And then when I had to go, after a couple of years teaching at Acworth, I had to go teach at Altree, and got down there with all those middle school, or at that time junior high kids, and I swear, I had the greatest classes I ever had was my first 2 years at Acworth. And there's a couple of kids sitting in this room that I had in class. The first 2 years, and when I got down to Altree, Lord, it was a different world. I had ninth graders, and Mr. Hayes, he'd tell me to come by and see him on Friday afternoon. He said, you need to get back in elementary. And, so he called Milton Turner, who was another one of those guys that came over in the Bill Hamilton era. And so I went over and started working at Bell's Ferry, got back in elementary, and Joe was teaching. Mr. Hayes hired her back at Acworth, and Mr. Keenum then named me. He had me, after I worked in the county office 4 years, he sent me to Powder Springs as principal. So I was over there for 3 years, and really had got it in good shape. It was easy to drive to Powder Springs. You just go and you had one red light. So it wasn't any problem. And I remember me and Henry and Lennox Black, a few of us, after we were playing tennis down at Kenworth in probably June, I guess, because school was out. And Joe came riding up there, and she said, Mr. Keenum wants you to call him. And you have to remember, when I started teaching at Acworth, we had teachers there named Dolores Hester, Ren Parker, Fanny B. McClure. I could go through and name I could name a number of them. And they were veterans. When we started teaching, they were there. They were in their 20th year or so, veterans. And so I'm over at Powder Springs, thinking life is good. Mr. Keenum calls me and he says, I need you to go to Acworth. I said, Mr. Keenum, you know, I said, Joe's over there teaching. I said, wouldn't it be better if I stayed? He said, no. He said, I want you at Acworth. That was right. Mr. Hayes had retired the year before that, and they had a person there, and that the fella didn't want to do it anymore, so the school was open. And so he said, I want you to go there. And he said, I'll get her a job so she can be close. Well, when I got home and told her that, she got ticked off because she was gone. She said, I just got settled teaching kindergarten. Now I got to move. So she moved to Kennesaw, winds up there, and then the Lord blessed me once again. When I came back to Acworth, I thought, you putting me back up there, and I got to be the principal for Dolores Hester, Ren Parker, Ann Kennedy. I said, I knew how they operated.
How about Ellen Hamilton?
I said, and Ellen Hamilton. I still quote Ellen Hamilton a lot today when I'm sitting at home talking to myself. I mean, I walked in there, I went back over, I thought, what am I going to do? These people, they're rough. I mean, those teachers were tough. But it turned out to be the greatest 18 years of my life because I had teachers like that one, that taught there. So Mr. Hayes, and going back to when Frank Brown came over here, he became the city of Acworth's first paid recreation director. So the next year when I came over, they added an assistant, and I became the first paid assistant recreation director. And And Mr. Hayes, some of these people that are in here remember the gym was open on Saturdays, and we would close the streets off. I taught life saving down at the beach. Frank left the next year and went into full-time recreation, and I was elevated to the full-time recreation director for the city of Acworth. So I worked 2 years as the recreation director at Acworth, and and you'll never guess who my assistant was. It was Mr. Tommy Jones. But we had a good recreation program, and Mr. Hayes was well advanced in because the community school concept had not existed yet, but it came on the scene about 10 years later, and he started the community school program at Acworth by using the gym as we used it. It was used all the time, and kids thoroughly had a good time. So he really had an impact on education in Cobb County, and I am so grateful for him inviting me over to become a school teacher at Acworth, because I'm like Henry now. I never heard of Acworth, but it's the greatest place in the world.
Well, give it up, Butch. We had some, what a lot of us always remember about the school.
That was the first day. When I was,
Well, there's a much older picture of the gym. And over in the corner is a trophy from Ellen's.
you wanted me to tell the story about that.
I do. When Butch told me the story that he's about to tell, I actually had never heard it before. I thought that, well, anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you about it, and it's going to end up with some significance about this right here. Okay, go ahead.
I've always loved history, and I love the history of Acworth. So when I retired, the Acworth School closed down, and it sat there for a few years just vacant, and then they were going to tear it down. That became the next thing. We're going to tear it down and build McCall Primary. So when that picture that you saw of me, that was the very first day that I'm from Powder Springs to Acworth. That was my first day. It was in the summertime, and it was only me and the custodian there, so I was happy. That's the picture, and so I hadn't been there about a year, and some of you that went to school there remember when you walked down the hall to the lunchroom, you got down to a set of stairs. You had to go down about 3 or 4 stairs, and the handicap rule came in effect, so the county came out and said, we've got to take those stairs out, so we're going to and in order to do it, they had to go almost back up to the office and just slant the hall down through there where it would be for handicapped purposes. So when they tore it all out, it was in the summertime, and we had to work in the summer, the 1 month. So I was there, and the old school, when Acworth School was built in 1936, the original gym was where the lunchroom is, that was part of it. And so when they tore that out, I could see the center circle of the old gym down the floor. I mean, it was, you could see it, just the whole floor of the gym. So they just built the school and left the gym floor there. So they covered it up. So when they got ready to tear it down, I thought, it'd be nice if we could cut the center circle out. So I got a couple of, we went up there, I believe it was beating ball, Mike beating ball. And I went up there and we had a chainsaw and we cut an area out in the hallway, and when when we got through, we realized this is heavier than we thought. We went and got a bobcat, got a person to bring a bobcat. He drove it up the hallway, and we chained what we could, got it out of the way, and then we got down and I cut the center circle out just like, you know, as much as we could cut with a chainsaw. And I got Tom Bredrington to frame it up and fix it, and it now hangs over at McCall School by their gym, and it's got a history of it. I wrote a thing to put under it, and but I was really proud of that. That was not the gym floor that all of you played on. It was the one that Willie B. Kemp played on back in his day. But if you ever up at McCall School, go downstairs and you can look and see the original center. Yes, that's what you'll see right there.
Hand painted.
Ma'am?
Hand painted.
Oh yeah, you can see it. They just took a brush.
Well, you know, Butch, when you were talking about Joe, and you said when she got to school that second year, you became a better student, had a better outlook. And I think that, to me, defines Joe, is that she made everybody good.
The Bible said who did the work for it.
Well, did you stop whining to your mama?
I did. Hey, she wanted to know why I didn't.
Any questions?
Go ahead.
No, I don't have any else.
Oh, I was just going to share my favorite Joe Hayes story. My mom, Mamie Jean Pearl, was the secretary. Sat right outside Joe Hayes' office. And I love the story when Mom told it. She sat right outside his office, and one day, William Milton, Presbyterian minister's son, I think he was in the second grade, and the teacher, and it's on the far side of the elementary school, sent him to take a note to the principal. So William comes over in second grade and walks in the office in front of Mom. And when he gets to Joe Hayes' office, there were 3 guys standing at the door. So William steps in line. You might know where this is going.
Yeah.
So anyway, one by one, they go over to Joe Hayes' office and he gives them a paddle. But William is quiet, timid, doesn't say a word. He walks in, gets a paddle. He walks back to the class and he's got alligator tears. And his teacher comes to see Mom and said, "What happened? What just happened?" And Mom realized what had just happened. So she tells Joe Hayes about it. This exemplifies what kind of principal he was. He then goes to the second grade classroom, walks in, and he tells the students in the class. And William's still got tears and just upset, you know. And so Joe Hayes calls William up to the front of the classroom and reaches out behind his back, pulls out the paddle, hands it to William. Joe Hayes bends over, touches his toes, and William paddled the principal. And he went from tears to the class hero. I just love that story.
I bet that's the only pattern Joe Hayes. Any other comments or?
Yeah, I'm Olivia Hester Goodwin, and my mother was Dolores. So, you know, y'all, she probably taught some of y'all, but anyway, I was in the first grade in Miss Fanny McClure's class, and I remember when Mr. T.C. Cantrell brought Mr. Hayes to the door and said, "This is going to be y'all's new principal." And I can remember him standing there and everything. And I just want to say that I had the honor of working with all 3 of these people. And it was just some of my very best years. And I just love y'all and thank you for all you've done. And I love Mr. Hayes. In fact, when I went to Kennesaw Elementary and Joe was down there, Mr. Hayes would come and bring me potted plants. I mean, these big potted plants, and I just loved them, you know, and he just would drop in, hey, you know, here's just some plants. So, you know, it was just, he was just so sweet, you know, and, but anyway, that's one of my greatest memories.
I don't need a microphone.
Okay.
I'm always interested, because I'm not from here, Henry, I'm from Ohio, and went to Ohio State.
Okay.
But my daughter lived in Alabama, so I'm a big fan of both. Anywho, I would be interested in having class, people who had Mr. Hayes, knew Henry, knew Butch, just so I have a connection of what this turnout of love means for everybody here. So if you can coordinate that, that'd be.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we commented that it has been a great reunion, and nobody even had to deny it. It's usually the way it comes along. I wanted to share a story with you about Miss Mamie Pittner. She was my third grade teacher, and I remember that during the first week of school, she introduced us to the art of folding brown craft paper in such a manner that you could use it for a book cover. And we were all, you know, going to do that, and it took us a long time because we were just in the third grade. But I remember that she kept on saying, now, children, if you were in Alabama, your mama and daddy would have to buy these books. So you better be thankful that the school in Georgia, you know, furnishes books. So I grew up thinking, wow, it must be terrible to go to school in Alabama. And then, you know, the greatest things happened to me in elementary school because of this big migration of people. So we're so thankful.
I did tell you that. I had to correct your mom on that. In Alabama, books were furnished up through 6th grade. From then on, you bought your own books, which I was glad because you could underline them, you could mark them, you could do whatever you wanted to, and nobody was going to care.
And my reply was, you mean people read them to me? Mr. Hayes was an encourager. I remember that not only did he, you know, bring the boys out of class and, you know, they go fishing or whatever, but two of my best friends, Carolyn and Donna, he would come and get them out of class, and they would go and sit with the children in the lower grades while, you know, that teacher was sick or whatever, and it never called me. I said, never.
I can't imagine.
I said, Mr. Hayes, you don't ever call me. And he said, well, Betsy, you're just not a teacher. you got a lot of talents, but you are not a teacher. So back then, you could either be a teacher or a nurse. I'm a nurse. Any other? I'm not a teacher.
I just wanted to share quick. I worked with Butch and with Gayle too, and so then I felt like I worked with Mr. No, but I didn't. But Mr. Price, he was always a practical joker, except that he liked to do the jokes. He didn't want the jokes to play on him, you know, sort of. But he liked to do that to everybody. So one day we went on a field trip, and we had to go in 2 different days, and so
so we can all hear.
the first group went first, and they came back and they unloaded everything, and Mr. Price got the coolers and the tarp and everything. I had a tarp from my house that was my pool cover that we used because the ground was all wet. And he comes by my room, he goes, you know, those teachers that are your friends, they would have just let all that stuff get thrown in the garbage, but no, Jerry and I, we saved that tarp for you. You know, and I said, oh, well, thank you, you know, and stuff. So we had it the next day. So then he comes up to me, and it's the day of the Christmas party. He goes, we got to teach those teachers a lesson. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you have to tell them that your husband got really mad because you didn't bring that tarp, didn't make it home, the pool cover, and that they have to pay for it now. And I said, well, Mr. Price, I can't do that. I said, because goes, it's Christmas and, the kids are wild and we're all stressed and I just can't do that. And he goes, oh, come on, it'll be fun. And we're up at the Grand Oaks and everything, and he comes up to me and gets me to tell all the teachers, he goes, that tarp is missing now because you all didn't, take responsibility for it. And they're stressing, Carolyn's stressing, Susan's stressing, remember them stressing? And everything about that. And he's like, it's okay. Well, I felt so bad, and I told the people, my teachers, and I said, you know what, we're just going to turn the tables on Mr. Price. I said, I'm going to say that y'all told me you were really sorry you lost the tarp, and you felt so bad you stopped at the store and got me a new one and just billed it to the school. and my daughter had little receipt things that she would play with, receipt books and stuff, and so she made out a receipt. We got somebody else to sign it, and I took it and put it on his desk in the morning. And so he goes flying down the road, he goes, what is this? And I said, you're never going to believe it, but I said, Miss Jenkins and Miss Heath, they felt so bad about losing the pool cover, they went out and bought me a new one and billed it to the school. You can't do that. And I said, I know. He goes, but how did they do that? I said, they just told them that they work for Acworth Elementary and to just build it. No, things like that have to get approved. You can't do that. And then he was in and he goes, you're not telling me the truth. And I said, I am. I said, I promise I am. And I'm like having my fingers crossed, And I said, if you don't believe me, go ask Miss Jenkins. I said, she won't tell a lie. And she went, Diane, don't put me in that position. And I said, oh, please, just do it. And stuff. We got him really good on that. Yeah, we did. And he didn't play more jokes on us.
Well, I'm Sylvia Flanagan, and I had the privilege of working with all three of the panel members. I loved Gayle Nettles. And I asked her why she was like a teacher's assistant, a paralegal, instead of a teacher, because she had her master's, she had all of this education, and she said, this is what I want to do. I want to work with children. And that really impacted me. I had the privilege of working at Pine Mountain Middle School with Henry as my principal. And one day, and I went to church with all three of them at this church, and one day I asked Henry, how did you meet Gayle? And he said, oh, Sylvia, I used to sit behind her in the 5th grade and play with her hair. And then I had the privilege of working with Butch Price at Acworth Elementary. And poor Butch, there were only 2 males on the faculty, the custodian, Jerry Bennett, and Butch Price, the principal. And I guess just out of consideration, Butch was so kind, he let Jerry use the principal's restroom off the principal's office. And of course, all of the ladies, we used every other toilet on the, on the property. But anyway, we came to find out that Mr. Price had an Alabama toilet seat on his toilet. And, that became a great curiosity. And when Mr. Price wasn't around, we'd sneak in and look at his Alabama toilet seat. But one day, his Alabama toilet seat was missing. And he was very upset. And he started going around asking all the teachers, have you seen my toilet seat? And no, none of us knew where it was. Well, he was really upset by this point, so he calls the Acworth police. And the Acworth police come, and they're going up and down the hall, especially the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade hall. And they start searching the rooms, and they found his toilet seat. in Cindy Bain's 4th grade classroom. And they took her out of the classroom with her hands handcuffed in and Mr. Price walking down the hallway. Her chest was so puffed out. And all the kids, I mean, it was just so much fun. All the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade kids had come out in the hallway, and everybody was saying, "Jailbird, Jailbird!" That was so much fun. I will never, ever, ever forget that. And of course, Cindy Bain she was a lot of fun too. And everybody it was kind of like right after testing, and everybody was ready to explode with stress and tension. And it was just a way for everybody to have fun. And I will never forget thinking how great it was that Mr. Price would let us have some fun.
If any of you ever want to pull a practical joke, Sylvia Flanagan can be your partner. She and I pulled probably the greatest practical joke of all time. I'll have to tell that one in private.
Well, before we break up, speaking of Alabama, we have some Alabama cookies. Oh. Just for the occasion.
We should give it, let
Yeah, well, sure.
By the way, we could tell you weren't from Georgia.
Nancy, before you wrap up, I do want to say something.
Okay. You don't need the microphone, do you?
No.
Okay.
So I'm over there in Hamilton, and all this group have been on families in each. One time, when Mr. Nettles there, he rode with us in a tiny little Volkswagen, as big as he is all the way from Wilcox County, Alabama, to see the scale. Mr. Hayes brought us over here literally the year of 59-60 school year, and not only did he find a place for us to live, he had us build a house right straight across the street from him. So we've never been separated in our minds from the fact that we thought we were related because it was Papa Joe as long as we can remember. And every single one of the anecdotes are absolutely true. He gardened, he planted things, and he was just like everybody's buddy. And they would use me to pick up whatever they happened to be shooting rabbits. Your daddy would use me to pick up birds when y'all would shoot. And the reality is, I've never imagined a life without this group being part of it. We came from Alabama, and none of my family did go to Auburn, the direct line saying, just mention that. But the reality is, it's been a blessing to all of us. All of us, almost everybody in this room is a product of it. Your husband from right down the road from where we're from. Later on, when Mr. Keenan got involved in our educational system, they expanded a little bit beyond Livingston and went as far as Mississippi to recruit, because Brother Keenan was from Mississippi. But it's been a phenomenal ride, very enjoyable. Thank each one of you for being here. Thank you for sharing your personal life experiences. Thank you very much for what you've done in this community and what you've done for all of us. The literal title of this tonight was Influence of Alabama Educators, and y'all have expressed and shown your side of it, but I would like for all of us to give these guys a hand because
I'm Sam Matthews. I finished Acworth in '63. Bill stole some of my thunder. I hope you all hear us tonight. It is Joe Hayes that connects all of us, but we meet, we see each other all the time. We see each other in restaurants and ball games, and unfortunately at funerals. And we say all the time, weren't we lucky to live in Acworth when we did? Wasn't it a wonderful time and a wonderful place? And you three are so responsible for making it a wonderful time and a wonderful space, just solid rocks in our lives. And go home tonight and sleep really, really well and hear our appreciation and our love for you. We do.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much for coming. I'm Deborah Campbell. I'm president of Save Acworth History Foundation. I hope you enjoyed the program as I did. Thank you so much, Mr. Nettles and Mr. Price, for being here and participating. And before you go, we have cookies and refreshments. And if you enjoyed this program, I'd like for you to consider joining the Save Acworth History Foundation. It's $15 a year for an individual, $25 for a family. Or if you like, if you don't want to join, you can follow us on Facebook at Save Acworth History Foundation. We'd appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming.